Welcome back to Stamps Old World UK, the channel where classic stamps meet real market value and history comes alive through paper and ink. In today's video, we are diving deep into one of the most iconic and widely collected stamps in the world, the United States 1-cent Benjamin Franklin blue stamp. This small piece of history may look simple at first glance, but it carries a powerful story, global recognition, and surprising market value that every stamp collector, beginner or advanced, should understand before ignoring it in an old album or inherited collection. The stamp you are looking at features Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, known not only as a political leader, but also as a printer, inventor, and early postmaster. Because of his contribution to the postal system, Franklin appeared on more U.S. stamps than any other non-president. The 1-cent Franklin stamp became a symbol of everyday communication in America, used heavily for newspapers, postcards, and standard mail during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Its heavy usage is exactly why condition plays such a massive role in today's market value. This classic blue 1-cent Franklin stamp was issued in multiple versions across different years, most notably between 1890 and 1908, with variations in perforation, paper type, watermark, and printing method. To an untrained eye, they all look nearly identical, but to collectors, these small details can mean the difference between a stamp worth a few cents and one worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That is why expert identification is always recommended before selling or discarding any old stamp. Let's talk about condition, because condition is everything in stamp collecting. A 1-cent Franklin stamp in poor condition, with heavy creases, torn edges, missing perforations, or faded color, typically sells today for around $50 to $100 USD. These are extremely common and were printed in the millions. However, a stamp in good used condition, with clear details, intact perforations, and no major damage can fetch between $200 and $500 USD, especially if the cancellation is light and does not obscure Franklin's portrait. Now, when we move into very fine condition, values begin to rise significantly. A clean, well-centered stamp with sharp perforations and rich blue color can sell for $250 to $750 USD, depending on the exact issue and demand at the time of sale. Collectors strongly prefer stamps with balanced margins because centering is one of the most important visual factors in stamp grading. A perfectly centered 1-cent Franklin stamp is far rarer than most people realize. The real excitement begins with unused or mint examples. A mint stamp with original gum, no hinge marks, and no discoloration can easily be valued between $1,000 and $1,400 USD, and in some cases even higher. If the stamp has never been hinged and still retains full original gum, collectors compete aggressively for these examples, especially in auctions. Mint-condition Franklin stamps are far scarcer than used ones because most were used for daily mail. There are also rare varieties that dramatically increase value. Some 1-cent Franklin stamps exist with rare watermarks, printing errors, or unusual perforation types. Certain varieties have sold for $5,000 to over $13,000 USD when authenticated by professional grading services. These are not everyday finds, but they do occasionally appear in old collections, family albums, or estate lots, especially when the original owner was unaware of their true value. Market demand for classic U.S. stamps remains strong worldwide, not only in America, but also in Europe and the United Kingdom, where collectors appreciate historical postal issues. The Benjamin Franklin 1-cent stamp holds international appeal because it represents early global communication, journalism, and the foundation of modern postal systems. As interest in vintage collectibles continues to grow, well-preserved examples of this stamp are becoming harder to find each year. If you own this stamp, the best advice is never clean it, never wash it, and never remove it from its original paper unless guided by an expert. Improper handling can instantly destroy its value. Store stamps in acid-free albums, away from moisture, heat, and direct sunlight. Even a small improvement in preservation can protect hundreds of dollars in future value.
In today's stamp market, prices can fluctuate depending on condition, certification, and collector demand, but one thing is certain: the 1-cent Benjamin Franklin stamp is not just common paper, it is a historic artifact with real monetary potential. Whether your stamp is worth a few dollars or a small fortune, its true value lies in its story, its survival through time, and its place in postal history.
Next up, the United States 2-cent George Washington stamp, a timeless classic that holds strong historical importance and surprising value in today's stamp market. This striking red stamp features George Washington, the first president of the United States and one of the most recognized figures in world history. His portrait has appeared on countless coins, banknotes, and stamps, but the 2-cent Washington stamp stands out because of its bold color, detailed engraving, and role in early American postal history. Issued during the late 19th century, this stamp was commonly used for domestic mail and printed in extremely large quantities, which explains why many examples still survive today. Although it may seem common at first glance, the real value of the 2-cent Washington stamp depends heavily on condition, centering, and originality. In poor condition, with heavy wear, tears, stains, or blunt perforations, this stamp usually sells for around $70 to $150 USD. These examples are very common and mostly collected for historical interest rather than investment. However, even low-value stamps like this still play an important role in building complete collections. A stamp in good used condition with a clear portrait, intact perforations, and a readable cancellation that does not overpower the design typically sells between $200 and $500 USD. Collectors often appreciate neat circular cancellations, especially if the stamp remains visually attractive. The bright red color is another important factor, as fading significantly reduces value. When we move into very fine condition, values rise noticeably. A well-centered 2-cent Washington stamp with sharp perforations and strong color can command prices from $550 to $800 USD, depending on the specific issue and demand. Centering is extremely important for this stamp, and perfectly balanced margins are far scarcer than most people realize, even though millions were printed. The highest values are found in unused or mint examples. A mint 2-cent Washington stamp with original gum and no hinge marks can easily sell for $1,500 to $2,000 USD, and in some rare cases even more. Never hinged examples are especially desirable and are actively sought by advanced collectors and investors. These stamps are much rarer than used ones because most were placed into circulation immediately after printing. There are also rare varieties and errors that dramatically increase market value. Some 2-cent Washington stamps exist with unusual shades, rare perforation measurements, or watermark variations. A few error examples in special printings have sold at auction for $10,000 to several tens of thousands of dollars, once authenticated by professional grading services. These high-value varieties are often discovered accidentally in old albums, family collections, or estate holdings. Today's stamp market continues to show steady interest in classic U.S. issues, particularly iconic designs like George Washington. Collectors in the UK and Europe actively seek these stamps because they represent the foundation of modern postal systems and global communication. As older collections are broken up and fewer high-quality examples remain, demand for well-preserved stamps continues to grow. If you own this 2-cent George Washington stamp, preservation is key. Never attempt to clean or press the stamp, and always store it in a protective, acid-free environment. Even minor damage caused by moisture, fingerprints, or sunlight can permanently reduce its value. Professional evaluation is highly recommended if you believe your stamp may be a rare variety or in exceptional condition. In today's market, the 2-cent George Washington stamp may range from a few cents to several $1,000s, but its true worth lies in its history, craftsmanship, and connection to the early days of global communication. Every stamp tells a story, and this one tells the story of leadership, nation-building, and the evolution of the postal system. Next up, the United States 3-cent George Washington stamp, a true cornerstone of American philately and one of the most historically significant stamps in the world. This 3-cent stamp featuring George Washington dates back to the mid-19th century, with some issues released as early as 1851. These stamps were created during a time when postal reform was transforming communication across the United States, making mail affordable for ordinary citizens. The 3-cent rate became the standard domestic postage for many years, which is why this stamp played such a crucial role in everyday life and national expansion. The design itself is instantly recognizable, with Washington's classic profile engraved in fine detail and surrounded by ornamental elements that reflect the craftsmanship of early stamp engraving. Unlike later mass-produced stamps, these early issues were printed using primitive techniques, which means no two examples are exactly alike. Variations in color, paper, impression, and perforation make this stamp especially fascinating for collectors. When it comes to market value today, condition and identification are absolutely critical. A 3-cent Washington stamp in poor condition, with heavy creases, tears, thins, or missing edges, generally sells for around $50 to $150 USD. Even in rough shape, these stamps still attract buyers because of their age and historical importance. They are often used as entry pieces for collectors interested in classic American stamps. A stamp in good used condition, with a clear portrait, intact structure, and minimal damage, typically sells between $200 and $750 USD. Light, well-placed cancellations actually add charm without harming value, especially if the design remains visible. Because these stamps are over 1,700 years old, finding clean examples is becoming increasingly difficult. In very fine condition, values rise sharply. A well-centered 3-cent Washington stamp with strong color and no major faults can be valued from $1,500 to $5,000 USD, depending on the exact issue and variety. Collectors pay close attention to margins, impression quality, and paper type. Early stamps with crisp engraving and even spacing are highly sought after. The most valuable examples are unused or exceptionally preserved stamps. A mint or lightly hinged 3-cent Washington stamp can sell for $19,000 to over $25,000 USD, especially when professionally authenticated. Some rare varieties and early printings have reached tens of thousands of dollars at auction, making this stamp one of the most valuable classic U.S. issues when found in top condition. There are numerous rare varieties of the 3-cent Washington stamp, including differences in perforation, imperforated edges, paper thickness, and shades ranging from dull red to bright orange red. Certain early imperforated versions are especially valuable and are among the most studied stamps in American philately. These varieties are often misidentified or overlooked in old collections, which is why expert examination is always recommended. Demand for early U.S. stamps remains very strong in today's global market, including among collectors in the United Kingdom and Europe. These stamps are not only collectible, but also historically educational, representing the early development of national identity, postal systems, and mass communication. As surviving examples continue to decline, values for high-quality pieces steadily increase. If you are fortunate enough to own a 3-cent Washington stamp, preservation is essential. Never attempt to clean, press, or alter it in any way. Store it in climate-controlled conditions using acid-free materials and avoid unnecessary handling. Professional grading can significantly enhance both value and buyer confidence. In today's stamp market, the 3-cent George Washington stamp stands as a symbol of history, craftsmanship, and long-term collectible value. Whether worth a few dollars or many thousands, it remains one of the most respected stamps ever produced. Thank you for continuing with Stamps Old World UK. If you enjoy in-depth stamp history, real market values, and discovering hidden treasures from old collections, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. More legendary stamps and fascinating market insights are coming soon, only here on Stamps Old World UK.